Hello and welcome to the Heretic Mansion, the Shin Megami Tensei podcast. I'm John.
I'm Neos, but you guys can call me Ant.
And I believe this is where I introduce myself, yes? A lot of people here haven't heard me on the airwaves in a while. This is Kevin Frane.
That's right. And for those of you that don't know who he is, Kevin Frane is the translator for the novel of Digital Devil Saga, or Quantum Devil Saga as it's called.
That's right. I don't expect anyone to just know my name from hearing it, but if you're listening to this podcast and you're familiar with the book, then that's probably where you would know my name from.
Yeah, so some of you who listen to Cathedral of Shadows might remember him from when he was on Cathedral of Shadows. That was 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, when you mentioned that earlier when we were talking, it actually blew my mind. I was like, no, it can't have been that long ago, was it? And I'm going through, I'm like, no, it was 2014, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That blows my mind. I know everyone's been very patient waiting for this book.
Especially I have yet to go out and buy them, but I've way back when, maybe 2-3 years ago, I've heard of them, but I haven't had the chance to pick them up. And people who read the book, the first one, were really fond of the work that was put into it, and they were wondering where's the second one, when is it coming out, and all this stuff. And I mean, everybody's been waiting, and it's finally here now, and a lot of people are smiling and happy about it. So thank you very much for bringing it out.
Yeah, for everyone who was ready to give up hope that it was ever going to see the light of day, it's here. It is real.
Yeah.
And then when it finally came out, a bunch of people were having problems getting holds of copies for themselves, but I believe those issues have been resolved, and so at least in the US you should be able to get all of the versions, and they're hitting the international websites probably almost any day now by the time you hear this.
Yeah, it was added on hardcover on Amazon like a couple weeks before it was added on paperback, and now it's finally available on paperback.
Yeah, so I know that was a big concern for people because not everyone can afford to spend $25 plus shipping on a book, which
right. Hopefully, we'll be getting a digital version soon.
Yes, a digital version is in the works. I know that they were saying priority was just to get the actual book out and in print first, and that's where they were focusing their efforts. And now that that's been done, I believe that the ebook version is in the work, and that should also hopefully be available fairly soon. I don't have a timeline on that yet myself, but if anyone follows me on social media, I will be updating as I get word on that.
Right.
Yeah. But, I'm actually on Amazon.ca right now because I live in Canada. I see the first volume up, not the second one, but that's fine. I'm sure the second one's going to be hitting the .ca site anytime soon.
Yeah, I saw just the other day somebody was asking when it was going to be on Amazon.ca, and it should be in a few more days.
Yeah, so this is not bad, actually. I'll try to pick it up when I can and start reading it.
I'll put a link to it in the description.
Right. Honestly, just thinking about it, because we've listened to the Cathedral of Shadows podcast, I've listened to it maybe a couple episodes before it started to go off. But honestly, I wasn't really aware that you were on the Cathedral of Shadows at one point, and that's to think that the podcast had ended. Almost maybe 3. What was it last year or
it was 2 years ago.
I can't remember that. Oh, it was 2 years ago. Okay, I think it was
I think it was actually because one of the reasons we started Heretic Mansion was because it's just sort of a follow-up to the Cathedral of Shadows.
Yeah,
because
it was kind of
we
I think in John's perspective.
Yeah, we didn't really have any mostly SMT focused podcast at the time. Not to say that these are bad podcasts, but for example, SMT Network, they tend to go off topic a lot, and the other podcasts, they're mostly focused on SMT. They're mostly Persona, like S-Link FM.
Honestly, when it comes to the whole creation of Heretic Mansion, when I first saw it, I wasn't aware that my buddy John was running it. I had to like learn about it in a Facebook group where he made a post, and he kind of asked me if I wanted to join on, and I thought it was a really good idea, actually, because that was when sorry, not Heretic Man, Cathedral of Shadows had went, and then I saw this new podcast that popped up on YouTube, and I was like, oh, is this kind of like a sequel? Is this like a brand new thing? And I was really hyped to see it when I first discovered it. So props to you, John, for pitching this idea and executing it really well.
Well, it hasn't really been executed well. We've been kind of on and off with our schedule.
Yeah, but that's life, you know. When you get school, college in the way, it's really hard to find time to do these things.
When your boss schedules you on overtime without telling you.
Yeah.
No, it's cool that you guys have sort of been carrying on that torch in the tradition of that. Actually, yeah, Cathedral of Shadows had me on a few times, and they were always pretty great.
I know.
I think a lot of people have been.
I know you were on the episodes where they did the featured audience participation, or FAP as they called it.
Yo.
Oh boy, FAP'd with us.
Rosin had me on a couple of his Twitch streams a couple of times. I remember that. Those were fun.
Yeah.
Saying how to pull boyfriend at one point.
Nice. Man, I should probably start Twitch streaming. I recently got a capture card. But
That's which brand?
Roxio.
The Elgato? I didn't hear that properly.
No, I said Roxio.
Oh, Roxio. Okay.
I've heard it's kind of meh, but I don't have enough money to. I don't have money to spend on an Elgato, especially if I'm going to be traveling.
I think the one I have is LGP Live Gamer Portable by AverMedia. That was on sale for a bit. I think it's still budget, but it only goes at 30 frames. But all you need is really 30 frames.
Okay.
I know new capture cards have the 60 frames option. So.
Okay. Well, we're getting a bit off topic.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So this episode is basically going to go the kind of the same way as the Cathedral of Shadows episode, where it's just going to be an interview with some updates, obviously, because it was such a long time ago.
It has been a long time. There's plenty to ask, I'm sure, and I'll hopefully have plenty to answer with, but not too much.
But yeah, I think Ant has some questions too. But anyway, we'll get started. Okay, so my first question is, how did you get to be a translator?
Sort of by accident. That's actually a funny story, because I wasn't originally trying to get into the translation industry at all. I was out in California trying to get into the biotech industry. But I speak Japanese. I used to live in Japan. I've studied at school in Japan. And you know how they tell you to include personal, quirky things on your resume about your hobbies and all of that? I had done that and mentioned, I've done amateur translation of Japanese songs and comics from the internet and that sort of thing. And so I wound up getting recruited by a headhunter who found my resume, and I basically got a job working in video game localization due to the fact that my resume made me look like a big nerd who spoke Japanese. And that led to the interview that got me hired, and that's where that all sort of took off. That was back in 2004. So I've been doing this for not quite 15 years, but close.
Man, I was in first grade in 2004.
Oh, wow.
That's yeah. You can count me in for that one too. Actually, I was a young lad just like John.
But yeah, that's actually really interesting. But sometimes that's how life is. Like sometimes you get into things on accident, and you love it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been the whole trajectory of my life since then. So it's been a fun and surprising sort of ride, and now here we are on a podcast talking about part 2 of 5 of a strange Japanese sci-fi novel series.
Right. One that's based on a video game that we enjoy. Well, not really based on, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, my next question is, so how has Bento Books been treating you, and how has working with them been?
They've been really great. I haven't had any issues with. Thankfully, most of the time I don't have issues with the people I work with. The industry is pretty close knit. You've got a lot of folks who are very much self starters. You kind of want to do a buy ourselves for ourselves kind of thing. And most of the people who work on this sort of thing, they understand what goes on the freelance end. They either still do that or have done that themselves. And it's not always let's just say, there's no shortage of issues that freelancers have to deal with just in the way that their job works compared to other people's. And so having a company that understands that on like a really intimate level makes there's less to worry about being mistreated because they know how that goes themselves,
Right. I mean, Bento Books is a pretty small company.
Yes. Yeah.
I
think
never
that's
even heard of them before the whole Quantum Devil Saga thing. But what were you saying?
Yeah, and it is a niche. I mean, there's not a whole lot of call necessarily for more obscure titles, but there are people who do want to read them, and so somebody has to do that, and I think that's why small press publishers like this they fill a very vital role in the media landscape.
Right. It's a small job.
I think I think fans of the franchise, that when they found out these books had come out in Japan, had just sort of assumed, oh, there's no way anyone's ever going to translate and publish those in the West. And okay, so it seemed for a while like that was getting off to a false start, but after a few years, here we are, and we're 40% of the way there.
Right, because I mean, when did the books come out in Japan? Was it like
2010?
Yes, that's a long time,
I believe.
ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it took the novelist a good 10 years to write them.
Yeah, she shopped them around for a long time. She mentions in the afterword of Volume 1 the issues that she had finally getting the books put together and released. And yeah, she sounds like she had to tough it out a fair bit herself. But thankfully for the rest of us, the books did finally see the light of day, and hopefully not as slowly but surely we'll be getting the rest of them to you.
Hopefully. But yeah, that's actually one question that just popped up into my mind. Has she written anything besides Quantum Devil Saga?
Oh yes, she's written plenty of books. She writes a lot of fantasy more than science fiction, from what I understand. A lot of original work, from what I've seen. I haven't read much of what else she's done personally. I just haven't had the time with my own job. But I know I believe she did a tie-in to Valkyrie Profile as well.
Oh,
but
nice.
if anything else that readers would know. But yeah, no, You Godai. This was her first work to ever be translated into English. Was the first volume of Quantum Devil Saga. So I don't think that many of the other folks would be familiar with the work, unless people are reading things in Japanese, and then they might know them. But
if they can understand Japanese. But I'll talk about my experience with learning Japanese later. But yeah, that's really interesting. But I remember that on the the next question, I remember on the Cathedral of Shadows episode, like, you talked about how you were interested in getting more involved, or just getting more into the Megaten series. So how has that been going?
Oh,
Completely
the
understand if
Megaten fandom was great for the release of the first book. Obviously, there was a lot of excitement within the fandom about these books coming out, and so a lot of people reached out to me. I was on a couple of podcasts. I was dragged around in and out of forums, and there's a real interesting passion that Megaten fans have. And
oh yeah, Megaten fans.
I guess because there's so much like minutia to fixate on. It's kind of like people when you're into something like baseball, and there's like a lot of statistics to memorize and all that. I think that Megaten has a lot of that, because you've got all these recurring obscure things that show up in all of these different aspects of the franchise, and like the sort of sub franchises, the sort of octopus that is Megaten, with all of its different tendrils reaching out in different directions, and how they use and reuse the same ideas and elements in different ways. And I really can't think of anything else that's quite like that, and it really does. It puts a nice, interesting spin on things. But by and large, everyone, whenever I've had to deal with people, they've been very welcoming, exciting to talk about the book, and I mean that's been great, and especially now with more recent releases of stuff, I've gotten to watch people play through things like TMS, Persona 5 as more recent examples, and I don't think that the Megaten hype train is going to be dying down anytime soon. At any rate,
No, it's not. Although one thing that they did talk about in that episode was how, like, the Megaton or the SMT branding was one of the main reasons that SMT is somewhat popular. Like, not Persona, but just SMT. But now they're kind of separating it. Like, Persona 5 didn't have the title SMT in it.
Oh, that's right. I didn't realize that, but now that I'm looking back and thinking of the title screen and all that, it's not there, is it? But it was there for 3 and 4, and obviously the ones before that as well.
Which, I mean, it's kind of ironic because Persona 5 has more connections to mainline and other SMT games than Persona 3 and 4. Like, you've got those DLC costumes, you got the SMT4 costumes, the SMT IF costumes.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into it and see how well integrated the marketing was with the rest of SMT in Japan versus the West.
Well, and in Japan, I know that a lot of the SMT games, that they weren't really called SMT, even though they had similar gameplay and the same monsters and stuff. Like, I'm not even Persona 1 and 2 were called SMT.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of debate among fans as to whether or not Persona actually is SMT, but in my opinion, I mean, it's got the same monsters, it's got the same skills, it's got similar gameplay. I think that's enough to make it SMT, if you ask me.
I would agree with that.
And there's also the whole marketing thing,
For sure.
how Persona really helped the rest of the franchise take off. But
yeah, you're always going to have people that get bitter about, oh, there was this obscure thing that I liked, then something else that was really big got popular, and now everyone likes it because of that, and you sort of, people resent that sometimes. And I think that's kind of an unfair way to be, but you do see it.
yeah, well, I mean, there's that whole war between SMT elitists and the Persona fans.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's really odd to see. Like, I don't know if it's the same for the Japanese audience, because I feel like the Japanese audience enjoys all of these games. To be fair, and they favor obviously Persona more because it has the most exposure. But like, just going back to the Western fan base, we seem a little divided when it comes to like this topic as a whole. Like, you have the people who started with Persona 3 through 5, and then you have the rest of the fan base basically who've played all of SMT. There's this like rift, and it really doesn't make any sense to me, in my opinion, because people should be enjoying everything, right? Despite opinions and all these stuff, right?
Well,
you never know until you try.
Well, their reasoning is because at least I think it's because they don't like the direction the new non-Persona SMT games are going, and they think Persona is the reason for that.
Yeah, of course, those are also reasons too, because of course,
Tokyo Mirage
if the formula worked in the last one, they're obviously going to use it in the next one, because of course, if it's not consistent, of course, different isn't gonna, I don't know. Basically, something different might turn off a lot of people, so I guess that's a reason why they continue to do what they do.
But that's not up to them to decide. That's Atlus's decision.
Yeah.
And they don't know they don't even know for sure if Persona was the reason. It could just be, they just thought they would try something new. I mean, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, there's a big,
isn't it?
There's always a big drive, especially in the Japanese industry. You want to try to do new things all the time, and everyone, when you're in charge of a thing, you want to put your own spin on it. And so, I mean, whether the genesis for that was one title versus another, and that's really difficult to categorically say one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, I want to ask you one more thing on this subject. Have you played Digital Devil Saga?
Directly, no. I've certainly spent hours and hours with the gameplay of the games, but I haven't actually had the chance to actually play it. It was pretty difficult to come by, at least cheaply, when the first of the books came out, which is when I would have gotten around to it. And
Well, that sort of thing makes the price go up.
yeah, it really does. And I have a very limited time window to play video games as is, especially a 2-game JRPG series like Digital Devil Saga. That would be a huge time investment to
Both of which take
really
about
sink my
40
time
hours.
into. But
Especially if
Yeah,
your
exactly.
completion is it's more like 60 because you got to do all that grinding for the optional bosses.
mm-hmm. I mean, they are on my list at some point in some hopeful, fanciful future where I can take a whole bunch of time off with my stacks of translation money, which will hopefully exist at some point.
Right. Well, they're great games.
Yeah.
Near as I can tell, that's certainly true. I really like the presentation of them. I think that, especially for the time that they were made, they're very impressive in what they were able to do.
It's done on a pretty low budget too.
And I do hear that when people are getting into Megaten for like, oh, what should I start with? I usually see people either mention Digital Devil Saga or Nocturne, and then people get into an argument with each other about whether you should do Digital Devil Saga or Nocturne, and there are purists on that front, and da da da. But I mean, it comes up a lot as a potential gateway to the whole franchise. So I think that speaks a lot for the quality of the games and how well they're received amongst the fans, and how accessible people think they are.
Well, I will say this: they are the hardest SMT games, in my opinion. Anthony would probably disagree with me, but I think they're the hardest because you can only have 3 allies out at the same time. In most SMT games, you can have 4.
I kind of agree with you on that,
Because
but
Anthony he's gone like way back. He's played Kyoyaku and Giten and If and like the really obscure old SMT games.
I played a little bit of Giten. I haven't actually gotten really far into Giten, but I'm for sure that later on I will. But like when I talk about like the difficulty of the games, it's pretty much like it's up to the player. Basically, everybody has like a different experience. This game might be difficult for this person. It really just depends on how you like approach it and like the time investment and what things that you discover. Because in all honesty, when you're playing like an SMT game or a Persona game, it's basically based on how the player views and plays it. Really, like take for example Strange Journey on the DS. I played it a second time around, and I started to discover like tips and tricks on how to do like things, and to make things easier for me while playing the game a second time around, right? Like resetting the game to reload and get different stats and all that stuff. It basically it's all on you as a player. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, the thing about Digital Devil Saga is that you don't actually summon demons. Instead, what you do is you kind of customize your allies' character growth. So, I don't know, some people think that that's better for getting into the franchise. Like, if you just don't want to have to deal with the whole demon collecting thing, then I'd say start with Digital Devil Saga, but otherwise I'd say start with SMT4. But that's just my opinion.
SMT4 and 4 Apocalypse actually are really beginner friendly. They're portable too, really cheap too to come across at this point, I think, because usually the Nintendo eShop, you can find them fairly cheap when they go on sale.
Right.
There you go.
So, anyway, next question is, well, just to get new people caught up on it, just what is Quantum Devil Saga? Like, and what makes it different from the games?
All right, so this is the explanation that's always a really awkward one to have to give. But the simple version is, this isn't a novelization of the games. Nobody took the story of Digital Devil Saga and decided, we're going to write novels about these. This is the original scenario writer, Yu Godai, who was herself, again, she's a novelist, and she was commissioned by Atlas to do the story for what eventually became Digital Devil Saga. She got sick partway into the project, however, and so she wasn't able to stay on the whole time and finish it. As a result, a lot of the latter stuff, particularly in the second game, diverged pretty far from her original vision of what she'd had in mind. But her contract stipulated, because it was her story, she got to keep all the rights to it, including novel rights. And so she eventually decided, okay, I'm going to go and do what I do best, which is write novels and not video game scenarios. And I'm going to refine and tell this story the way that I originally meant to do it. It took her about 10 years of rewriting and shopping around to finally land on the finished product as it came out in Japan, I believe, back in 2010. But yeah, so this is more of sort of the original creator's vision of the official or authentic, quote unquote, version of the story as she originally wanted it to be.
Yep. So there you have it.
Yeah. Hopefully that's not too complicated.
Right. Yeah. So just don't go in expecting it to be novelization of the video game.
Yeah. It's not a novelization of the video game, and nor are they original books that the game was based on. The game did come first, but this is... Yeah, it's what I just explained.
It makes you think how the game would have been different if she hadn't gotten sick and stayed for the whole production.
Yeah, it would be interesting. But although there are some elements that wound up coming through, like the character of Gale, for example, was not in her original treatment. But when she went back to write Quantum Devil Saga, if you've read the first or second volume, you know that he obviously is a character, a very major character, in fact.
I mean, hell, Surf, he's your stereotypical silent protagonist, but in the book, he's like an actual character.
Right, and that was another thing. That's kind of where Gale came from in the first place, is because since you needed the stereotypical silent JRPG protagonist, all of the things that would have gone through Surf, they needed to invent the character of Gale to sort of be the one to explain how everything worked and be the cipher for the reader in a way that the first-person narrator of a book, you don't have that now because it's a video game. But because the character sort of fits into the mold, and obviously the Vedic cosmology that the Embryon members all embody, the decision to keep him in the novels, I believe, was still smart. And he's actually one of my favorite characters to actually write dialogue for when translating. He's very... There's a certain flow to all of his sentences that comes out in this really natural, inorganic, computer-like manner, which is, of course, his whole deal. But it's interesting that the process of writing him feels very much like the words that he's speaking, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, like, are there any, without spoiling anything, are there any major differences that you would like to talk about?
Without spoilers. Okay. So we can talk spoilers for book 1 at this point. I feel anyone who's listening to this, the book's been out for almost 3.5 years, 4 years practically. So
just mute the volume.
So the character of Janana, who famously dies in Digital Devil Saga 1, they have that same setup, or a very similar setup, in Volume 1 of Quantum Devil Saga, except Surf pulls this badass, like, refusing to let things go the way that they do, and they do actually manage to save her life. And so she survives the events that, in the video game wind up with her dying, which has major ramifications down the road, obviously. She's a pretty prominent character. She figures in pretty heavily. So having her around changes things a fair bit as well. The character of Lupa is a completely different role than he served in the game. He shows up at the very end of Volume 1 in a very surprising manner. Rather than being in charge of his tribe, he's actually a refugee of a tribe that claims to have been attacked. And he also has this strange tie to Surf and Heat in his past, that's completely not anything that happens in the Digital Devil Saga game as well. And once again, without spoilers, that's something that clearly has to have ramifications further down the line, obviously. what else? Because there's a lot of fun surprises, but I don't want to ruin them.
Talk about how Sarah calms the characters down.
Oh right, yeah. So if the instead of singing anime music, we've got a young girl's blood to help stave off this demonic influence. That's a big major visceral difference. I'm not sure if that was something that she had in mind. By she, I mean you, Godai. If that had been planned initially and they changed it for rating purposes and presentation purposes, or if she just decided to change how she wanted that mechanism to work.
I don't know if that would have flown by in a PS2 game from 2004.
It certainly would have been. Well, are the games already rated M, or are they T?
Well, in North America, they're rated M. I'm not sure what they are in Japan.
Oh yeah, what the Zero rating is.
Like one game that had to be censored in order to avoid the Japan's version of an M rating was Danganronpa, where they made the blood pink.
All right.
But I mean, there was also Persona 2 where they had to censor Hitler by giving him sunglasses, because apparently Japan's rating system has a law where you can't include a real historical figure in a game. So they just gave him sunglasses and called him Führer.
That's hilarious. That's their workaround, actually.
Although
I hadn't realized that was the story behind it.
Yeah. Although one thing I don't get was there's another Japanese game called Operation Darkness that's it's really obscure, but it's a really fun strategy RPG set in World War II, and you fight Hitler as a boss battle, and they talk about him throughout the game, yet they don't censor him. They just refer to him by name. Like, I don't know if that was something they changed for the English version, but both Persona, it was also localized by Atlas, so Persona 2 and Operation Darkness both had the same localization, so I don't know what the deal was with that.
That's something I have to look into now. That's actually an interesting gaming history tidbit that I'd be curious to learn the answers behind.
Yeah, just the many appearances of Hitler in video games.
It's very topical at this point.
It all began with a little
Gaming
game
news.
called Wolfenstein 3D. But
I played on a what kind of system was it? I think that was my 486. Ooh, that takes me back.
But yeah,
Yeah,
anyway.
it was released on was it a PC? I forget.
Yeah,
it was a PC title.
It's
Yeah.
one of the first-person shooters ever.
I think I had it on actual 3-inch diskette rather than I think it was pre-CD-ROM.
That's way back. But anyway, we're getting a little off topic again. So my next question is, well, I mean, you kind of did already answer it already, but it's just how has the translation been going, and what's involved with the translation?
So in the case of something like this, the process really for me has been to go through. I've read all of the books in Japanese in order to familiarize myself with the full sequence of events and characters, because there is a big through line, a big longer arc. Obviously, it's not just here are 5 different episodes of a story. It does continue on in a big cohesive unit. So making sure that you know where everything's going, because you need to be able to properly foreshadow things. This certainly was a big part at the end of Volume 1, which that was. The schedule for that meant that I hadn't had time to read the books after Volume 1 at first. But during the course, while the book was still in editing after I had done the initial pass on the manuscript, I went on and read further into the story through Volume 2, and thankfully had time to go back to the editors and be like, oh, hold on, you need to change this, and this toward the end, because there are all these cryptic references that show up at the end of the first book. And I had to work with them as best I could. Now that I knew specifically what they were talking about, I was like, oh, hold on, I didn't quite render that right. That's not really referring to what I thought it was. And thankfully, that's the sort of thing where having access to the full thing ahead of time certainly impacts your ability to properly present it. But normally what I do is, it is. So I'll read the book once in Japanese, then I go through and I translate it as I go, and then I go back and I don't proofread it. I sort of go and read my original translation and the Japanese side by side, and I sort of retranslate / tweak / edit the whole thing again. So I wind up doing 2 full actual passes before I send it off to be edited.
Yeah, because the thing people don't realize about translating, it's not like you just read it in one language and then you translate what they're saying. There's complications. Like you have to know the language and the culture really well, and you have to know the context of what's going on in the story so that it doesn't sound ridiculous in English.
Right, and there are other things that are even, like, I think a lot of people might not consider, which is, for example, the interweaving of dialogue and prose in an English novel isn't the same as how dialogue and prose are interwoven in a Japanese novel. And in order to present that properly, you do need to move things around. You're not changing the words, you're not censoring anything. But, for example, typically in a Japanese novel, you'll have a long series of lines, like somebody will have a long line of dialogue or a few sentences, and then you'll have a short paragraph describing everything that character or those characters were doing while that was being said. Which, structurally, if you were to do that in English, it wouldn't read right. That's not how we organize novels.
Exactly.
And so,
for example, I mean, this doesn't really have anything to do with novels, but I took Japanese classes when I was in 9th grade, and when you greet someone, you're supposed to say "dozo yoroshiku," which means "let's have a good relationship." I would not say that to someone when greeting them in English.
Yeah, and even then, the rendering of that is like "let's have a good relationship," but that's completely figurative as well. But there is no direct translation of "dozo yoroshiku" that works in a way that's even sane. And so that's a sort of subtle thing too. One example is throughout the books, the members of the Embryon refer to Surf in Japanese as leader, like, specifically the English word leader. And so in English, that's been changed to Sir, because that's how, in a sort of paramilitary structure like a tribe like the Embryon, that's how that sounds right in English.
Yeah, like if I were in the military, I wouldn't be calling my commander leader.
Yeah, so like especially Argilla, it's like, give me your orders, leader. Like that sounds like you've been indoctrinated into some weird cult, and that you're not just showing respect to the person who is in command of you and your unit and the troops. And actually, I remember Yu Godai was actually tweeting about this, about how, like, she thought it sounded so cool in English. It's like, it's like they keep calling him Sir. It's like, that sounds so cool. And she really liked that.
So yeah, I mean, but yeah, don't think that being a translator is just reading and then translating something. Just like being a human version of Google Translate, which is horrible.
Yeah. Anyone who's tried to use Google Translate to get good information out of things has learned already that that's not how you get good information out of anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. I when it comes to, like, for me personally, when I'm trying to look at what, like, Atlas of Japan or the Megaton Atlas Twitter, I'd have to go on Google Translate and figure out and get, like, a gist of the situation. Like, sometimes I'll have to, like, copy out like the translated thing from Google and then, like, rephrase it to understand it better.
You just have to
basically
guess what they're saying.
Yeah, kind of. You got to do some guesswork and maybe, like, this you got to rearrange some words, and then you start to figure out the gist of the situation and whatnot. That's coming from me personally, who has, like, no knowledge whatsoever on Japanese. Like, I basically kind of use, like, muscle memory and whatever resources I have that I can to understand what I'm trying to, like, get at in a better perspective. But recently in college, I've joined a Japanese cultural club, and I hope down the line, because we're having meetups where we learn Japanese basically, and we have like a textbook basically, and yeah, I hope down the line I start to learn that way, and in the future I can probably take some courses to really just strengthen that knowledge on the language and whatnot.
Right. I mean, I like I said, I was taking Japanese in high school, but I kind of stopped. It wasn't because I lost interest, but it's just because I wasn't using it outside of class. So I just kind of started forgetting stuff.
Yeah, if you're only studying something or learning it to, like, get a homework assignment done or to pass a test, and then you don't ever use it after that, that's not really going to go very far for your language building skills. You do need to keep at it. I mean, language learning is a sort of a constant process. I mean, I've been working in translation since 2004, and I learn new turns of phrase and terminology in Japanese all the time. And it's not like, oh, you step one is learn the Japanese language whole cloth. Step two, become a translator. It's like you build on that. You're always building on that.
Like you said,
Yeah.
you lived in Japan for a while.
I did, yes.
But yeah, anyway, so our next question, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but compared to 3.5 years ago when Volume 1 released, there seemed to be a lot of more hype going. We're not seeing that as much now. Like,
Yeah, a big part of that is on me. I have been so busy with other projects that are going on recently that I haven't had the time to really do a lot of the promotion the same way I did when the first book came out. And then, as a lot of the listeners probably already know, excuse me, there were availability issues as soon as the book finally did come out, and so that kind of made it difficult to really build up a hype on, hey, everyone, the book's finally out, go and get it, when there was nowhere you could actually get it yet. Now that those issues have been resolved, and I have more of bandwidth, I'm going to finally be able to take to the internet and hopefully build more enthusiasm and awareness of the book. I think a lot of people were reacting like, "Oh, I didn't even realize it was out. How did I miss this?" And yeah, so and then hopefully things like this podcast will help get the word out.
That's what I was gonna say. I also shared it on the Phantom Thief page, but it barely got any interaction.
I think I know the reason why. It's really weird, but it seems with Facebook's algorithm because it's a really I don't know how to say this, but like a cheap way. Like basically they force this on pages and whatnot. If you want something to do well on a page, you've got to pay. You got to pay real money, obviously, to promote it, to get attention and stuff. And I think that's what it is basically, because once you've centered yourself around the one topic, Facebook's algorithm basically looks at that and basically says, okay, this is the main focus of the page. We're going to focus on these phrases and whatnot. But when it comes to other things, like whether it be Shin Megami Tensei or the rest of the series, you probably won't get enough, interaction, basically, unless it's like a lucky day. Basically, it's got like 50 or 100 likes, just depending on the forecast.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's another problem with like getting the word out. But other than that, like, even then, like, you just tell your friends, tell people in like the mutual groups you have, or like people who love reading manga, and if they like want to try out reading Quantum Digital Devil Saga. I honestly think like it's really good that it's here now, because I when I first heard about the first volume, I didn't know there was a second one coming out, so it kind of like caught to my attention when it just like, oh, it's here. And I just had to recall back when the first volume had come out, and I know like the hype was there when the first one came out, but like I kind of just didn't like gauge my interaction because I didn't know what it was, right? So
yeah, and we've already discussed what a confusing beast it is.
yeah, that's for sure.
Hopefully Volume 3 will do better.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no. So small press and niche titles like this benefit hugely from word of mouth, and as you know, one of the primary means of marketing, and supporting releases like this is what allows other books like it to come out. So again, if this is the sort of thing that you want to see more, definitely keep that hype train turning if you can. Yeah, as you guys were already suggesting.
And don't pirate it, please.
Please.
try not to pirate it.
But
Um,
one thing I am going to try to do, I'm going to try to see if I can get it added to my college's library. That way, if someone's just scrolling through the section and they see it, it might catch their eye. There's actually kind of a funny story behind that. When Volume 1 came out and I was in high school, I also tried to get it added to my high school's library. But, I mean, keep in mind that this was a private Christian school, and the people here are very strict and authoritarian. So I showed it to the librarian, and she was like, "Oh, well, this is Japanese, and you know how the Japanese like to hypersexualize women." And I'm like, "Well, that's not in this." And she was like, "Well, they showed the character's leg on the cover," and then she pointed to Argilla's Argilla's outfit that showed her leg. I was just like, "Are you fucking serious? Are you serious?"
Man, that's something. I honestly didn't think that was a thing that librarians look out for. All that stuff. But I guess for like your environment.
Yeah. At college, they'd probably be a lot more lenient.
Yeah, for colleges for sure, because people are out of like high school and stuff, and it's post-secondary, right?
I mean, even after I transferred to the public school, that probably could have been a good opportunity to add it then, but I mean, it's too late for that now.
I mean,
they had us read. They had us read
high school.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think high schools nowadays, I'm pretty sure, you can get that stuff added. I know for a fact that, like, when I was in high school, I saw Yu-Gi-Oh! I saw, like, obscure mangas and stuff like that. Like, the type of things I saw Chibi Vampire, which was, like, a semi-ecchi manga, and I was like in the school library, so it is possible in high schools nowadays. I'm not too sure for like
public high
Catholic
schools, not the kind I was at.
Yeah, not probably for Catholics, probably not. So
well, they were actually Baptist, but I mean, after I transferred and I started going to a public school, they actually required us to read 1984 and Brave New World for the senior year, and I love that. They never would have had me read anything like that at the private school.
Yeah. Actually, I do have a question. So, I'm just trying to figure out how to word this. When it comes to like the whole translation concept, what advice do you have for people who are interested in pursuing this type of career, or anything that has to like do with translation? Like you said before, like this was something that that didn't like catch your eye in the first place, but like you did it anyways. But like what advice do you have for those people who are looking out to pursue this similar, I guess, career and whatnot?
So first and foremost, one of the things that you need to have, in addition to knowing the language that you're translating really well, whether that language is Japanese or some other language that you're translating, and assuming we're talking about translating into English here, by the way, your English writing skills also need to be really good, especially if you're going to be doing media translation like this as opposed to technical translation, which is a kind of a different animal. But like media translation for things like books, comics, video games, your English writing skills are really, really important for that as well, because translation, though the way that I'm borrowing a phrasing here and I forget from whom, I apologize for forgetting who I heard this one from, but paradoxically, translation is not about the words themselves, it's about what those words are trying to say. And if that doesn't make sense, I'll refer back earlier to the Dozo Yoroshiku comment about how, what this means is like, oh, hey, it's nice to meet you, even though that's not literally what you are saying. But that's how you need to think to render it in the context in a way so that it's understandable. There are plenty of, any number of idioms or even just regular old terms of phrase that pop up that you just cannot render one-to-one. A one-to-one translation between any two languages, especially Japanese and English, just doesn't exist. And the ability to properly know how to, okay, what is this trying to say? Now, what's the actual best way to say that? And that requires some. They most places are going to want somebody who, at a baseline level, is a good, competent writer in English. Like, somebody is going to be editing it after you translate. In all cases, that's true. But the higher the quality that you start with, the higher the quality that editor is going to end up with. So they want to be able to make sure that they're hiring translators who are can put out quality work.
Does the person who's editing it speak Japanese as well?
Not always. It depends. I've certainly done plenty of translation editing myself, and I do obviously speak Japanese. There are plenty of times where there's somebody who doesn't. In a lot of cases, the ideal would be to have somebody who does, but again, it's more. I think that if you're dealing with somebody if you have a good enough translator and a good enough editor, it wouldn't matter if they spoke Japanese or not, because the language that you're giving them is already, you've already gotten them something that's really good, and it should be clear and followable, right. And they shouldn't ever have to refer to the original language.
So they're just
again, that's not always possible.
Yeah, so they're just checking it to make sure it's grammatically correct and stuff.
In this case, yes. I mean, there are obviously going to be cases check translation right. Authenticity and accuracy, and that's usually a few steps up the line in some cases versus others. Different agencies and companies handle it in a different way. But there's something else that you just reminded me of that I wanted to point. So one of the things that most places do when they decide to hire someone, or rather to add them to their stable of translators they go to, because most of them is they'll give you a test, like a translation test. Not like, here's like a homework assignment or anything like that, although it's actually not that different now that I think about it. But they will, depending on the type of translation they're going to be having you do, they'll give you either like a few pages or a certain number of paragraphs. For a lot of video game translation agencies, they'll offer like different types of system text versus descriptions versus bug text, dialogue, and what they want to see there is like how well can you translate the language, how accurate is your translation, and then how good does your work sound? Does your style fit what they're looking for? Like, does your translation come across as like really stiff and robotic, or is it nice and freeform? Does it sound nice, or do you take too many liberties with your translation? Do you not adhere closely enough, and you're too interested in like writing your own thing? Like, there's a sort of spectrum that you could follow along in that, and a lot of places, they're there. They want to see how well you're able to work with confines of that, and so yeah, like being able to not just accurately translate Japanese, but to flavorfully and faithfully reproduce that in English in a way that it is true to the original and sounds good in English at the same time. That's, I think, where the sweet spot really is.
Exactly.
And that's a skill to develop.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to get from your statement of the advice is just becoming a translator, you have to do just more than that. Like, you have to think outside of the box when it comes to deciding what's right in terms of sentences and phrases and what to use, and then when you pass it over to the editor, it's already there basically for them. They just need to go through it and brush up some things.
I have one great editor who I work with on one of the comics that I regularly translate, and she's great because she picks up on things that wouldn't occur to me and asks for clarification which I appreciate that. There's not always a lot of back channel communication that way, but I appreciate that she takes the time to do so. Like one famous instance that just as an easy to understand example, and one that I remember was there was a scene where somebody had taken like spy photographs of this military thing, and they go, okay, it's like we need to pass these along to so and so. Like she should know what this is, and that sentence like she should know what this is. The editor asks and says, does that mean we need to show these to her because she'll know what this is and she can tell us, or she should know what these are? It's like no, like it would behoove her to know about this. Like which of those two did that mean? And that's something like when I wrote that line, I was like, oh right, you could read that either of those two ways. And the editor tweaked that to like, oh, like let's send these to her. She'll be able to identify what we're looking at to make that less ambiguous.
Yeah. I could totally understand that concept. I also have another question, basically, just regarding like Megaten content. Is there any other like interests, or I don't know if translators get requests for anything, but like for other obscure Megaten media, let's say like maybe Persona 1 mangas or Majin Tensei mangas. These are just the things that are coming off my head right now.
Wait a minute, have the Digital Devil Story mangas been
go
translated?
ahead.
Sorry, I was asking, have the Digital Devil Story books been translated?
Oh, you're talking about the original Megami Tensei.
Yeah.
I think the first
they've
one.
They've at least been fan translated, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure for a fact.
Yeah, so it sounds like your question is, how do you go about ensuring that things like this get translated, or how would you get the ability to work on something like that? Is that your question?
I guess more so. I'm not too sure if you take requests or like you kind of just like pick out what things peak whatever is trending in in the book world.
Yeah, so the way that it works is that it's not so much that the translator picks what they want to work on, it's that's all on the publisher, where they have to acquire the rights to something. It's like, okay, like we want to release this book, in English. They have to sort of figure out there's all the legal copyright stuff on that and licensing involved. And then they usually seek out the translators that they want to hire. They'll typically have people that they've worked with before, and they go, okay, like who would be a good fit for this project? Let's go and get them, see if they're available. Like freelance work can be pretty unpredictable that way. So yeah, it's like I don't have the luxury of just say, oh, this would be a cool book. Like, it would be cool if this book were out in English. I can't just go translate that into English and then go around and be like, hey, does somebody want to like print this? It doesn't really work that way because again, like these are like, sort of obscure things, and so a company needs to make sure that at the end of the day, the company has to be able to support itself and stay in business,
and they have to
in order to bring things out. Yeah, exactly.
Like because earlier you said that you Godai had the rights for the novelization, like so Atlas had nothing to do with this. That might be different for the other novels.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so like Atlas, in fact, doesn't have any license ties to Quantum Devil Saga, although there had been talk about possibly, this was back earlier, like where they were certainly interested in the book's release because it does tie back into ultimately their games, but they're not Atlas branded, and I don't believe Atlas has any part of the license for at least these books.
Right, but like I'm saying, that might be different for the others.
Oh yeah, no, like quite possibly / probably. And if we're talking, like fan comics or fan about, then that's more of a thing where okay, if somebody wants to like commission a translator, like hey, can you translate this fan work? And again, that depends on the fan work in question. Like, does the original creator not want somebody to translate this, or would they rather find somebody that they trust to have it translate that for them, and then hey, like I want you to do the official translation of this comic that I did to put on English speaking sites. That's something where the potential of what you can and shouldn't do really works on a case by case basis.
But don't ask to do it for free.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I mean, some people will, and a lot of times it is like a labor. Oh, like this would be really great if this were out in English, and people will work on it in their spare time, and that's why projects like that tend to take a long while, because you're doing something that is a full-time commitment, and if it's not your full-time job that you're getting paid for, you obviously can't devote that full-time to it, and so you kind of have to work on it in your spare time, and that's why fan translations tend to take a while, is because you've got a life you have to do in the meantime, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and you can't be asked to do it for free. I mean, that's. I mean, you wouldn't want to take like 4 or 5 hours out of your day to just translate something for no price at all.
I mean, some people might, but it's going to be you're going to have a harder time finding. If you approach them and be, hey, do you want to do this for free? Probably not be that keen on it. You're more than likely to run into somebody who's really enthusiastic and will offer their services,
right?
Rather than being able to solicit them for free. But that's a different thing, right?
Right. But yeah. So anyway, the next question is. So, well, I mean, we've kind of been answering this the whole time, but just what's it like to be a translator? Like, is it something you enjoy? I'm sure it is.
No, it's really interesting because you come across so much stuff that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily be exposed to. This sort of ties back into something that was asked before, but I don't really pick the projects that I work on so much as projects get offered to me and then I take them. And when you work in freelance, a lot of the time it's whoever comes to you first with a paying job when you don't have anything else going on is where you start. You learn very quickly that you can't be too humble and hold out like, oh, I only want to work on this sort of thing. And so you get to see a wide range of things like genre, theme, and then like even like quality. I've had to translate a ton of like garbage, like gotcha smartphone games over the years, just because hey, like here's another company like crapped out one of these and it's being localized and somebody has to translate it. We'll pay you to do it. And I'm like, yeah, all right, sure. And it's I feel like I've translated the same game like half a dozen times. It's part of the whole you can spend like X number of crystals and you get a card with a certain star rarity and like all the explanations of all of that sort of stuff. It's the same thing like over and over, and like that's one of those things where it's like well, this pays the bills. And then you get to something like Quantum Devil Saga where it's like, hey, these are books that as somebody who's read them, it's like I actually really like these books, and that really makes the process of translating it and getting to work on it like fun and engaging, and it's really that is really exciting. And so you go through a spectrum of sometimes like this is going to be up your alley and it'll be a lot of fun, and sometimes it's this is like I'm working on this thing. I don't care about any of the characters. The theme and the setting don't interest me, but you still do the best job you got to do
because it pays, because it's money. But yeah, I also
at the end of the day.
yeah, go ahead. Or okay, well, I'll just ask what other sort of stuff have you worked on in the past?
For translation?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've most of my translation experience comes from the video game industry. I was an in-house translator at Sega of America for a few years before working more in the actual localization production role rather than translating directly. But since being freelance, I do still get a bunch of my work from the translation or the translation of video games. I have been branching out, though. I mean, obviously the novels like this for Quantum Devil Saga are a big part of that. I did half of a short story anthology for Tokyo Ghoul. So I was sort of joking that all of my novel work is for some reason about books about eating people. It seems to be a theme. I'm currently the official translator for Seven Seas Entertainment's Arpeggio Blue Steel.
Nice.
If anyone's familiar with that, I took over for the original translator was it was Greg Moore. He did a great job up through what he had done. Because I had actually been. That's one of those series that I was reading already before I wound up as the translator for. So that was exciting too. It's very. That's the first time that I've ever been assigned to translate something that was already a title I was actively a fan of at the time. I mean, I am a fan of the Quantum Devil Saga books now, and I've read them all. But
you didn't know about
that didn't happen. Yeah, exactly. If I hadn't been hired to work on the first volume, I never would have read the other 5. This was a case where I was already familiar with and following the story, and which made it super exciting because since I was translating, it's like, oh, here, we have to get you the next couple of volumes in Japanese that haven't been released yet so that you're all up to speed. I'm like, oh, it's like I got to jump ahead several months in time to get caught up on the plot. That was really fun. And then, of course, I have like my friends who are also reading it, and I'm like, there's so much stuff I want to tell you, but the English volume for that's not going to be out for another year and a half, so I don't want to ruin it.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like it'd be great. But anyway, next question. Are there any myths and misconceptions about translation that you want to debunk?
I would say I think that there's kind of the idea that translation should just be this thing where it's like a quick, easy, over and done thing. I remember I think it was on NeoGAF or some similar forum where they were talking about somebody was waiting for a translation of some novel, and they were like, "Why is this taking so long?" It's like it's just one book. Like how hard and how long could that be? And it's just like the answer is apparently a lot more than you think. If that's if you just think that a book could just materialize, like how long does it take you to read a novel, and then now imagine, okay, now you have to write it, and now you have to write it from a different language. It's like it's not like, oh, you just sit down and in the course of a couple of hours you've got a novel translation. It's like, no, like each of the Avatar tutor books took a couple of months apiece to actually translate and retranslate, and that's not even getting to the editing and all of the other publishing process.
Exactly.
Another misconception about video games is like, oh, like don't worry about like changing things, like, oh, like just translate the text and stick it in the game. And again, that's also not how that works. The actual
sound really weird.
Yeah, the actual process of having to code the English version separately from the Japanese version, that's a whole thing. You have the development team working on that. It's not just you hit a button that goes like bing bing, like, and now suddenly it's magically in English. And,
right.
Yeah, the logistical wrangling especially for like an RPG or of the scope of a game like say Persona 5, where you've got, I'm sure that there are a bunch of different translators on that who all had different portions of the game that they had to work on, and then you've got to have it all edited together so that it all makes sense. And it is a big labor, time, and effort intensive process. And I think that a lot of fans just sort of wish it'd be like, oh, well, just translate it, don't do anything fancy, and then have it be done. And it's like, well, it's that can't happen for so many like workflow and logistics reasons, like why that just
especially
work.
For a 120-hour game.
Yeah, it takes a lot more than 120 hours to translate a 120-hour game. A lot more.
Exactly.
One
thing I really wanted to ask you about was dual audio. Like, what's involved with getting that?
Oh, you know what's funny is that this fiasco, actually, I just heard about this for the first time the other day.
Yeah.
I heard about this whole controversy about the dual audio. So I can't really speak to the technical end of that because I didn't work in development. I worked in publishing. So I'm not a coder myself. But I do have some experience having to deal with like audio coding issues in other games. And so, yeah, the fact that you would then need to... There's a certification process that you need to go through with games, and if you make any even minor changes, you have to like go through that again, because the idea that anything might have broken in the meantime, even if you just change something simple or something major, the certification still needs to happen. Like, everything needs to be checked off. You need to make sure that the product isn't defective, that it's working as intended, and that it meets the manufacturing and publishing standards that it needs to be set up to. And obviously this all happens in advance of release. There has to be lead time to actually make the physical game and all of that.
Right.
Which is why, yeah, if you're really close to your deadline and you've got all your stuff tested, it's like, okay, everything's tested good, we're ready to go. It's like, oh, now we have to add a whole new feature. It's like, well, now you have to go back and test and retest the whole thing all over again. And so that'll certainly add to your production timeline.
Right. But like,
Yeah.
Yeah, Ant, go ahead.
Just to add on with a whole dual audio topic, I've seen developers go out like this infamous NeoGAF post I've seen for a while, and Xseed's statement about dual audio and how they go about the process, and how it's really a tedious thing to like to go about. Basically, like you have to get the licensing first, and of course, like how you mentioned the testing and whatnot, right?
Right. So, and you have to go through everything that pops up. You have to basically make sure that is the right file playing in the right spot in the right times for this entire game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also royalties
audio
with the voice actors.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the royalties to pay for a Japanese like voice track for a game is often just as expensive as recording the English in the place from scratch. So at that point, now you're talking a big budgetary increase.
Exactly. But yeah, what were you going to say before that?
The original Yakuza, I was the localization producer on that, and that game famously only includes English audio and no Japanese.
I played it.
And it's one of those things where that was done on DVD-5, and there was not physically room for data for both English and Japanese voice tracks.
Exactly.
And so it also splitting it, making it a 2-disc game wasn't an option, and reconverting over from DVD-5 to DVD-9 wasn't an option. And so that's one of those things where it's like, all right, like dual audio is just a physical impossibility, and it wasn't the sort of thing where, okay, we're going to have to redo the whole release timeline of the game for that. At that point, you're basically talking about like redoing the whole localization process from scratch, and that's no company is going to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can totally understand the hardware limitation for sure. Like, it's not that prominent now, where
because we have
and now that we've moved on to Blu-ray and all that, it's way less of an issue. But still, it's nowhere near the issue it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I actually have this one game on PS2 called Soccer Wars. It actually comes with the Japanese audio, but it's on a separate disc.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Ant, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry, you were talking to me, right?
Yeah.
You cut out for a bit.
Oh, all right. I said, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Just on the topic of that, like, what was I gonna say? I forgot about it. The decisions, or like the decision making when it comes to like whether a game receives dual audio or not, like I totally understand the whole licensing part and the
programming.
Yeah, does the fan input affect that at all?
Oh, definitely. It certainly can. If the company has reasons to suspect that sales are going to be vastly improved for something, or if they think that sales will be hindered for not doing something, that affects the bottom line. And the corporate people who are in charge of saying, yes, we're going to spend the money to add this feature or not, and ultimately that's their job, is to make sure that the company is going to make money when they release the game. And so, especially when it's a prominent game, like something like Persona 5, which had been in development for a really long time, it already has a pre-existing fan base because it's part of a big franchise, which was in turn part of an even bigger franchise. And so you that has a huge vocal fan base that they know to listen to.
Right. You should have seen
for a niche title, like you're sort of, I don't think a title like say Trails in the Sky or whatever, like that doesn't have the vocality that a company is going to really have to
invest time.
Not invest time in, but it's just that's one of those cases where the localization people are clearly obviously going to be that was done by Xseed, I believe.
Yeah.
But again, they're not the developers on that, so they're not the ones who are in charge of ultimately what goes in the game beyond what the content that they're responsible for doing. Actually, does Xseed publish as well?
Yeah, they do.
Or
yeah,
they
they also do. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they're not just a localization outfit then. Okay, so then that actually probably they probably actually do have better control. And actually, that's one of those cases that you were talking about earlier of, oh hey, like if you have like a thing that you want to do, these are the sort of things like, oh hey, like there's a big demand for this game, like the fans really want this game, and it's the sort of game that we would be, it's within our wheelhouse of games that we would translate and release. That's one of those things where, okay, now that you've got vocal fans like that, and then you can then seek out and like, hey, we want to have the publication rights of this in the West, and then things how that work. Actually, this dovetails nicely into another thing that I can talk about now that I've got the official go-ahead to talk about it. Spike Chunsoft had a poll of what's the next of these visual novels that we could potentially do to release, and the high up on the poll was 428. And so they're like, all right, like people really want this game to come out. Like, let's go ahead and like we've demonstrated through fan voice that there is a market for this. Somebody in some room must have run the numbers and said, okay, yeah, we think that this could be profitable, and we've got the stuff in turn to do it. And that's actually what I just got done finishing translating.
Nice.
Just about a week ago. Yeah, that was very, very exciting. That was a really cool project to get to work on. If you're familiar with 428 Shibuya Scramble, you mentioned Danganronpa earlier.
Yeah, so. I'm like, I'll check that out because I've just been playing Danganronpa these last couple weeks. I'm really liking it.
I only know about it through John and a couple other people in the, I guess, in the fan base. But I've like watched the anime, so I'm like I'm familiar with this series, but like for sure I'll check out 428. The whole poll thing seems like a nice idea. I think if other, I guess, companies follow suit, like they can engage for attention for like what the fans want, and if they're gonna make money like that.
With the internet landscape and the fan landscape and niche publishing being what it is today, like it's actually a very exciting time because you have the potential now where you can really directly reach an audience for something that would be normally too obscure to actually find and focus on. And because of the way that internet and fandoms work, the ability to tap into those niches and then cater to them it's better than ever. And that's why you're starting to see a lot. Ordinarily would have been just way too weird and obscure to come over, getting brought over now, because you don't just have a fan base that's vocal for it, but you have smaller companies that exist specifically to cater to them, and I think that's exciting for folks. It's exciting to also be part of, for that matter.
Right. Well, I mean, what was I gonna say? But yeah, when the localization for Persona 5 was announced, and it was announced that it wasn't going to have dual audio, the fan base flipped. Like, and Anthony knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. First, it was honestly crazy to see that inputs from the fan base asking and demanding, this game. I don't understand, like, all the companies are doing it. What's Atlus's excuse, right? Type of thing. And I mentioned the whole, the licensing and the troubles to go about, making sure everything is right when it comes to, like, because Atlus has to go back into the game, like you said, and test these events and see if everything's lining up accordingly, right?
Yeah, you can't just like, oh, here we've added a whole new audio layer to the game. Well, we'll just assume that worked fine.
They think that that's all you have to do, but it's really not.
Yeah,
And on top of that,
it's,
there's also
I
legal
think,
stuff you have to do.
yeah.
But
And I
because
think
of
people were
yeah, go ahead.
complaining about I can't remember. There was like some audio glitch on the PS3 version of the game. I'm not too sure if it's like been fixed or anything. But I've heard reports of that. But I think the if anything, it's probably just like something really rare to come by while playing the game. So yeah. I guess that really affected Atlas USA's decisions on, to maybe like, hey, give us a little bit more time. We'll put that in if you guys really want it, type of thing. So
Yeah, but I mean the game did get delayed a month and a half because of it.
yeah,
Well,
I think that contributed to
Yeah.
it for sure.
The thing is, Atlas said that the game wasn't delayed for dual audio. They said it was just because they wanted to go over the translation again and make it as good as they possibly could because this is their biggest project of the decade. But I actually went to a panel at Nakacon that had Goro's voice actor, and I asked him if that was the real reason the game was delayed, and he told me he was never called back in to re-record lines or anything like that.
Yeah, there's no way that within a month and a half that you would record new dialogue, get it coded, and that seems like a really unfeasible timeline to have done audio pickups before release. Just knowing how long it takes to get things certified and tested and all that, I think that the voice actors probably got it right on that one. And again, I'm speaking as somebody who does work in the video game industry. I have no official connection to the Atlas or to Persona 5, but just based on what you just told me, that sounds reasonable.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right,
for
my
sure.
little CYA there. I am not speaking on behalf of Atlas or any professional things when I say that sounds like a feasible thing.
Right.
I mean, like you're in the industry, and of course,
Yeah.
how these things like execute. So it's of course, the same type of logics that apply to other companies, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, my next question, and this is gonna sound like a really dumb question, but is there such thing as a bad Japanese dub?
Oh yeah, that's one of those things where if you one language and you're not just reading the words off, like there are grating voices, there are obnoxious like vocal tricks that they'll add to like a character, and yeah, I mean there's just like anything, it's just like you can see a movie with some really good performances and some really bad performances. Like that's the same thing. Like even among like a Japanese voice cast, like there will be good actors and not so good actors. Like I think the idea that like every Japanese voice actor is like gets everything perfect every time, and that if you're lucky enough to live in Japan, all of the audio work you hear is going to be amazing. It's just not true, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah, because one of the things people were complaining about when they announced Persona 5 wasn't going to have dual audio, they were complaining that the English voices are bad, Japanese voices are always better. And I'm just thinking, you don't even know that. Like, the only reason you're saying that is because you can't understand Japanese. For all you know, it could be even worse than the English version.
Oh yeah, and they've been saying that for a long. Saying that before I started in the industry, back when you were in first, second grade, like you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
that was still always a thing. It was always never good. And like as somebody whose job used to be to help direct the English voice acting in games I was working on, it's like, come on, like give us some credit. There are some really good English voice actors out there, and trying to maintain some sort of semblance of purity that like Japanese automatically equals better than English is, I think, a dangerous mentality.
Because
It makes it harder for you to enjoy things on their own merits, or at all.
Like you go to any anime forum website or something, ask people if they prefer dubs or subs. 90% of them are going to say sub, and then say the English voice is always bad. Japanese voices are always so much better. Man, weebs will be weebs.
I guess it's just a common thing to see really in the fan base. Like if you're really obsessed with anime and stuff, it starts to get like, you're used to a type of thing. That's why you want it more, right? And like I can totally understand that concept of that. But like for me, I don't phase out the English dub at all. I think, the game when it's released, it's meant to play like a certain way, right? Because, hey, why would the localizers put that in, right? And not have you use it really. It's like an option that's there to experience a game in a different way, and like in a way you can understand it basically. So
yeah, I mean, like obviously the people who took the time to like record this English voice script and to write it, like they didn't go out of the way to go, oh, how can we ruin the people who are playing it? How can we make sure that they don't enjoy this? Like obviously that's not the what goes into that.
yeah.
And like I'm not saying it's bad to prefer the original Japanese voice acting to the English voice acting, or it's wrong or bad to like one more than the other. That's not what I'm saying. I think the preconception that A is always better than B is just what I would caution against.
It's dumb. I mean, yeah, there are bad localizations. For example, Yakuza 1. No offense. Well, I shouldn't say bad localization, but just the voice acting in it was really bad.
No, and that was a thing that the company wound up learning from. I feel like after that point, there has not been English voice acting in a Yakuza title since. I don't think.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we're getting more and more games releasing now that just don't have English voice acting. Like Tokyo Mirage Sessions didn't launch with English voice acting.
Right. No, that's something that's definitely been changing over the last 15 years or so. It was very rare at all to have games that only had Japanese voice acting.
Right.
And that's getting more and more frequent, especially because, again, this is the thing where, okay, if the fan base already prefers this, and like something like Tokyo Mirage Sessions, that's such a obscurely specific target demographic. It's like people who were really into both SMT and Fire Emblem. It's like that's a pretty safe bet where it's just like, is this fan base going to be really upset if we don't include English voice acting? Like, no, they're probably all going to play it in Japanese anyway. Yeah, okay, let's just give it out in Japanese. And like, I think that's a smart, economical decision. I think that spending a lot of money to do a full English voice thing for a game like that, where most of the audience frankly doesn't need or want it, would just have been a waste of money. And
right.
And
again, it's not because English is bad. It's just like that's a case where it just didn't make sense to do one.
Yeah. Just be thankful
I think
you have
to add on to your reason with Tokyo Mirage Sessions, I think it's because why go with the English dub route when the songs, of course, the songs are in Japanese. They're owned by or recorded by the Avex Group. And they're well known for their legality issues and whatnot. Like, when it comes to
Avex has been around for a long time.
Yeah, so in a sense, like you were saying, it is more of like an ethical decision to hey, what's the point of putting in a English dub when most of the songs and everything, like they have these issues, and
back in the mid-late 90s, it was the norm back in anime that you would record English versions of the song too, and that never happens anymore. I can't remember the last time I saw modern anime that had a localized English version of even the opening and closing themes. But no, they would do it for the insert songs and all of that. Like, you would have just, all right, all of these songs we're going to have English versions of. That was just what they used to do back then.
Yeah, most of the time, they don't do that anymore. Those English dub songs weren't very good.
Yeah, and in some cases they were. I think Pioneer probably did it the best, but Pioneer had the luxury of having a good international presence, and so they were able to really do a job. And also, they were also a big audio company as well, and so that gave them the technology to make sure that what they were putting together was up to their own standards. And also, other people weren't localizing it for them; they were localizing it themselves.
Well, yeah, that makes sense then. But there are just some really memey dubbed openings of anime shows, like the German opening of Naruto.
Oh God, I've not seen that.
You should watch it, and it's not an anime, but the Chinese opening of Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh boy,
is hilarious.
That's something.
I had a roommate in college who collected as many different language versions as he could of the opening theme to the old Gummy Bears cartoon.
Oh my god.
He had it in something like 16 languages. It was just a thing. This was like back in, I want to say like 2000, 2001, something like that.
Where did he find them?
Oh, this was way back in the day. Like, we still used Real Player back then. If anyone listening to this is old enough to remember Real Player,
Sounds familiar.
This was back in the day of the big file sharing websites. Like we had like your Napster, your Kazaa, your LimeWire. That was where you had a lot of stuff getting passed around. This was
I didn't start using the internet until about 2005. So
I feel so old now, but that's all right. But yeah, that's how things used to go back in the day. Every parody song was attributed to Weird Al Yankovic, whether he actually did it or not.
Yeah. I spent a lot of my time on YouTube watching these Super Mario 64 machinima videos.
Oh my god, that was me too.
There's one called Wrath of the Ice God.
Oh, dude, I'd watch that every single day. When I come home from school, I'd pop on YouTube and watch that.
I checked to see if the new episode was uploaded, and I got so sad when the uploader's channel got taken down.
Yeah, that's when Nintendo started to get involved into the YouTube community and whatnot. And that's when YouTube started to change as a whole.
Well, it actually wasn't because Nintendo took him down. It was because his account got hacked.
Oh yeah. I don't know why I thought that. I think I remember something like that, and then I don't know if it was the same person, but they were trying to do a reboot.
Yeah, we don't know for sure if it was the same person, but yeah, he was trying to do a reboot, but he just kind of died after that. In like 2011, I think it was.
Yeah.
When most of the people listening to this have no idea what we're talking about.
Probably. But yeah.
But yeah, that we're just about done. I've just got one more question. It's when can we expect Volume 3?
Yes. The short answer is I don't know. I honestly don't. That is going to be something that as soon as I have word on that, I will be letting people know. I was as diligent as I could have been for Volume 2. Every time I got information, I shared. It's just the information was not quick in coming. I do know, or I've at least heard, that certainly the hope is not for it to take 3.5 years between volumes. I mean, at that point, you'd have an entire generation of people would come and go by the time you were done with the whole thing. But right now, I honestly have no knowledge. I couldn't even begin to wager a guess. I mean, hopefully sooner rather than later, at least for my own sake. But yeah, I mean,
I guess like
last I heard, the plan was still to keep releasing the books.
Well, that's good.
I guess it's whenever whenever the time comes, right? Time will tell, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the fact that the second book hit this sort of stumbling block after the first one doesn't kill momentum too much. Like I said, now that my own bandwidth has improved, I'm going to help get the word out myself and see if I can build at least some of the earlier hype for the first book for the second one.
I mean, it was pretty obscure to begin with.
It was, and you always have to worry about diminishing returns as you get deeper into a series.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make sure like I pass on word to the cons I go to and stuff in the near future, because I mean, this is something that is a part of Mega 10. Technically speaking, not right-wise, but it's something. It's like an alternative story to the Digital Devil Saga games, and I feel like this is important to people who are interested in that franchise to take a look at these books and see what the original writer intended.
Right.
The experience basically.
It would also be a good opportunity for people that just aren't really familiar with the series. Maybe they'll be in a bookstore and they'll see it, and then suddenly they're familiar with it.
Yeah. That's for sure. Like one quick Google search will probably pop them up with the video game for sure if they like stumble across it.
But yeah, I'll be sure to talk about it at cons I go to. If my panel at TaioCon gets approved, then I'm definitely gonna mention that because it's a panel about the history of SMT.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm planning to do one at Anime North, though the panel site is actually under construction, so I can't really do it at the moment. But once I can, I will.
Actually, Kevin, that actually would be a good way to get for the series to get some recognition. You could go to cons and do panels about it and stuff.
I was actually just at SnafuCon in Sparks, Nevada this past weekend.
Nice.
That was my first official anime convention appearance as an industry insider rather than an attendee. And even then, the last time I was at one was, I think, back in 2000.
Wow.
But yeah, so hopefully I will be making the convention circuit some more, and I'll be able to have, again, the longer I'm at this, the more I have stuff I have to talk about.
Yeah, maybe you can come to TaioCon. That's in Mesa, Arizona.
All right, that'd be an excuse to go to Arizona.
Or Anime North if you want to.
It's like on the other side of the continent.
Yeah. It's a big convention.
Well, yeah, hey, and hopefully it'll be much sooner than 3.5 years the next time I find myself talking about a Quantum Devil Saga book.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and the last thing is, are there any other projects you're working on that you'd like to talk about?
Well, the big one was what I already mentioned, which was that should be coming out, I believe, in the spring of 2018. But I believe that part of the reason that the novel translation experience that I've had through the Quantum Devil Saga books is part of what led to my being a translator on that. I did the math, and it's about 3 novels worth of text all on its own. So it was quite the undertaking, but it was a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of the story and the characters, and now that the translation itself is over, I actually find myself missing it in a way that I don't always miss a translation project once it's done.
Yeah, I'll be sure to check that out.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're not gonna answer questions because we don't really have time for that.
Yeah, I don't think we ever got any actually.
Yeah.
I forgot to put up a post
I
recently.
I didn't ask any, but actually, this isn't.
Hopefully, what we've got here covers most of the bases of what people want to know.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
This doesn't actually have anything to do with Quantum Devil Saga, but it is something that has to do with Atlas that happened recently. Do you want to talk about it, Anthony? It's about the emulation.
Sorry, you cut off. Oh, you're talking about that emulation debacle. Okay. Yeah,
I have not heard about this.
Yes, this is
basically Atlas they're going after people. They're making a PS3 emulator because people are using that to play Persona 5 on their PCs.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of controversy about it.
Yeah, I think Atlas's way of going about it was really, I don't know, really something rare to see. Like it's something that major companies like Nintendo or Sony in another stance, or I believe Sony should be taking action instead of Atlas.
Because it's an emulator for their system.
Yeah, it is their intellectual property that's ultimately being involved.
Yeah, and I got really, really curious as to, like, I understand, like, yeah, of course, this is one of your major titles and you want people to buy it on the system that it was released on. And I understand that, but, like, I felt like shooting, like going about this was just really, really messy for them in a sense, and it's gained mixed press in a sense, in accordance to, you know, how the fan base reacted to this. I personally think Atlas should be going after the hosting sites that are hosting these the video game files, of course, right? You know, that's the ROMs and whatnot. Yeah, that's the big thing that they should be going after, not the emulator. Like, for sure, like, of course, I'm not saying that they should have saw it coming. It's something. It was more of like a test to see to test their emulator. And hey, we can emulate Persona 5 as well, but like it's a PS3 title and it's been released on PS3.
Persona 5 was one of the last PS3 games.
Yeah, I think. Unless like
it's
there's
one of the
some
last.
other titles.
I know FIFA and NBA 2K18 are releasing on PS3 and Xbox 360.
But like in the years to come,
it clearly has to be one of the last PS3 games because this whole time keep saying PS3. Like, don't they mean PS4? I had no idea there was also a PS3 on a 5.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, that goes to show that had been confusing me this whole conversation.
Oh, sorry.
No. But I mean, like again, that just goes to show what the state of the PS3 is. I couldn't imagine that a game released in like April of 2017 came out on the PlayStation 3.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, a lot of localization teams have just like, I mean, in Japan it's a bit different because consoles usually get supported a lot longer, but a lot of localization like companies, they're just not bringing their games to last gen systems. Like Star Ocean didn't get released on PS3 in North America.
Yeah.
Again, like there's all that money and time has to go into it, and if like look, we're going to be buying this, or I'll buy it for the new console. PlayStation is always an interesting thing, though. The PlayStation 2 games were being made well into the lifestyle just because it had such a huge install base that you couldn't not do it. It was just, it didn't make sense not to release it because there were just millions and millions of people who owned the system.
Yeah, it's
155
million to be exact. I mean,
I was about to say, I knew it was around 150. Yeah.
Wasn't the last PS2 game to be released Pro Evolution Soccer 2014 on PS2?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay, yeah, that's impressive.
It was either 2014 or 2013, but I know it was released on PS2, PS3, and PS4.
Yeah, I am. There's another game also I want to mention that happened to release, I think, fairly recently.
It was Pro Evolution 2014, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Confirmed, yeah.
I think it was either three years ago, maybe. Yu-Gi-Oh! Tag Force Special for the PSP. This was out when the Vita was a thing. Like it was like in its like, later stages. But that was weird to see like a PSP game being released really recently. Yeah. John, any last words or anything?
No, but I mean, Kevin, thank you for being on here. It was an honor.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah. I was really like kind of hyped for this moment too, because like it's great that we got like a guest on, and like
a guest who's actually important.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll definitely point people to the episode once it's up.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
I'll be sure to put links to Quantum Devil Saga Volume 2 in the description.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be very helpful.
Yeah.
And like I said, if my panel at TaioCon does get approved, I'll be sure to talk about it there. But
All right.
yeah.
Well, thanks for the invite and having me on, guys.
Yeah.
And I hope that people are informed.
Hopefully when Volume 3 comes out, we'll still be podcasting.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you later.
Goodbye.